Queen Camilla.
Queen Camilla.
I'd just like to say that Carole and I are absolutely delighted by today's announcement.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
That made her dangerous.
When Queen Camilla bullied Princess Charlotte in the reading room, she had no idea Carole Middleton would find out. And what Carole did next shocked everyone. It all started on July 7th, just a few weeks before the royal ascot on July 18th. As usual, everyone tied to the royal household was expected to attend. But Carole Middleton had decided she wouldn't. She told herself she would rather stay in Bucklebury to enjoy her quiet garden and leave the noise of the royal world alone. But her daughter had other ideas. Kate called her, and her voice over the phone was gentle at first, then insistent. "Mum, I need a favor. I won't be there for the second day of Ascot. Please, at least be there for the children." Carole had hesitated. She did not like the crowds, cameras, small talk with aristocrats. None of it made sense to her. But when Kate begged a second time, saying, "They've missed you so much," her heart softened. She agreed. But what happened when she arrived changed everything. Stay tuned. Although she missed the first day of the races, on the morning of the second, she took her time getting ready. She chose a soft pastel dress with delicate floral embroidery, the kind that looked as if it belonged in an English summer painting. A matching hat and pearl earrings finished the look. When she arrived, the formal setting turned instantly into an emotional moment. Charlotte, George, and little Louis broke every rule of royal etiquette and ran to her. At the sight of them, she stretched out her arms to welcome the kids. She then brightened her face and pulled them into her embrace. She felt the thud of their small hearts as they clung to her. The media was quick to take a picture of the moment, but to Carole the headlines did not matter at that time. She hadn't seen them in weeks. After the hugs and exchange of pleasantries with the senior royals, they moved to the private box. The day was bright, the crowd noisy but cheerful. The thunder of hooves rolled across the track like distant drums. Waiters moved around carrying trays of champagne flutes and tiny sandwiches. Charlotte and George stayed close to their grandmother. Sometimes they would lean against her. Then, at another moment, they were seen holding her hand. Even Louis kept tugging at her sleeve, pointing out horses and hats he found funny. By late afternoon, one of the family's favorites had won. Laughter and applause rippled through their box. As they prepared to say their goodbyes, Carole surprised them. "I'll go with you to the palace," she said, almost casually. "Just for 2 days." George's eyes widened. Charlotte grinned. Louis clapped and bounced on his toes. The car ride back to the palace was calm, almost sleepy. The children leaned into her, as if making up for all the days she had been away. By the time they arrived in the evening, everyone was tired. Dinner was skipped. They went straight to bed. The next morning, during Charlotte's study time, Carole found herself moving close to the reading room. She took a seat just behind the slightly open door, then took a novel and started reading it in her lap. From there, she could see Charlotte bent over her desk, pen moving steadily across the page. But nobody could see her from her position unless you looked carefully. The room was quiet, except for the scratching of the pen and the ticking of a small clock. Charlotte was writing an essay. She always looked so serious when she wrote. Her tongue was poking out slightly in concentration. An hour later, the door opened again. Camilla stepped inside. Charlotte turned in her chair and gave a polite smile. "Good morning, Your Majesty." Camilla did not reply. Instead, she walked straight over and stopped behind Charlotte. From there, she could see the neat lines of handwriting on the page. She leaned forward slightly and began to read. At first her expression lit up with interest, but then, suddenly, she stopped. Her eyes fixed on a section of the page. "What is this?" she shouted, so loudly that Charlotte flinched and jumped to her feet. The sudden noise got Carole interested in what was happening. She half rose from her chair, watching. Charlotte's small body tensed as if she were about to run from the room. She took one quick step toward the door. "Will you sit back down?" Camilla barked. "What happened next will shock you. Keep watching for more." Charlotte froze. Confused, she turned, looking at Camilla as if trying to understand what crime she'd just committed. She sat slowly, her hands on her lap. "How could you—" Camilla began, then shook her head, as if the words were too absurd to finish. "How could you miss something so simple? Your paragraphing is sloppy, your grammar full of mistakes, and you call this an essay?" Charlotte blinked. "What did I do?" Her voice was small. Camilla gave a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "Of course you don't know. That's the problem. You never know, and your mother never knows either." She tapped the paper with one finger. "This is sloppy. This is careless. Is this an essay or the scribbles of a child?" Charlotte's mouth opened. "I thought it was—" "You thought what?" Camilla cut her off, her tone slicing through the air. "My granddaughter, Amelia, writes essays that could be published. And she's not a princess. She's not the future of anything, and still she manages to take her work seriously." Charlotte's eyes dropped to her lap. Her cheeks flushed pink. Carole could see her granddaughter fighting not to cry, her small shoulders tightening with each word that landed. Camilla wasn't finished. "And yet, here you are, bouncing around yesterday like some overexcited toddler because you saw your grandmother at the races, and today you can't write a simple essay without mistakes." Charlotte's hands clenched on her knees. She tried to speak again, but nothing came out. The weight of the silence pressed down on her. From behind the door, Carole's knuckles tightened around her book. She stayed still. Her presence was still hidden. Eventually, Camilla seemed finished. She placed Charlotte's paper back on the desk with deliberate care. Then, as she turned to leave, she paused in the doorway and looked back at the little girl. "I just pity the monarchy," she said. Her tone was very cool. "People like you destroy it. If this is what you call an essay, then God help us." Her lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that wasn't warm but mischievous. "And you jump on your grandmother's lap like a toddler. Yes, that says it all." She gave a sharp, almost theatrical laugh and walked out. Charlotte sat frozen for a moment. Then, the instant the door clicked shut, she ran. She didn't stop until she reached her bedroom. She locked the door, buried her face in her pillow, and began to cry. Carole, still seated behind the door in the study room, didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the now empty desk. She sat there for a long while, her hands folded over her book. A few hours later, Catherine came looking for Charlotte. She found Carole in the reading room she was about to leave. "Where's Charlotte?" she asked. "In her room," Carole replied simply. She didn't mention the shouting, the insults, or the tears. When Catherine knocked on her daughter's door, Charlotte quickly wiped her face and sat up straight. It was as if she wanted to look composed. She wanted to be brave. "Why did you leave the reading room?" Catherine asked gently. "I finished my essay," Charlotte answered, her voice steady. "Well," Catherine smiled, "it's time for lunch." At the lunch table, everything appeared normal. Silverware clinked softly. Small conversations were all around the room, and the warm scent of roast chicken filled the air. No one mentioned the morning. It was not until the meal ended that the silence was broken. "Don't go anywhere, because this is where it gets better." As Charlotte stood to leave, Catherine asked, "What are you going to do now?" "And I'm going back to the reading room," Charlotte replied. Across the table, Camilla's voice cut in. "To write some essays, I suppose," she said with a short laugh. Most of the table didn't react. The meaning was lost on them. But Carole heard it. Every word. Every barb. And she was the only one, that knew what those words meant. Charlotte blinked rapidly, trying to keep her eyes dry. Then she excused herself and walked, almost running to the reading room. Once inside, she closed the door and buried her head in her arms on the desk, her shoulders shaking. Carole followed. She entered quietly and stood for a moment, watching the small figure at the desk. Then she stepped forward and touched Charlotte's shoulder gently. The girl straightened quickly, swiping at her cheeks. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "You don't have to hide it from me," Carole said softly. "I was there. I saw everything. I heard everything she said." Charlotte's face changed. She looked relieved. At the same time, she looked shocked, and something like hope flickered all at once. "You did?" she said. "I did." There was a pause, and then the words tumbled out. "Am I a bad writer? Am I a disgrace?" Carole leaned down so her eyes were level with Charlotte's. "You know I'm not just your grandmother. I'm your friend. So believe me when I say this. You are not a disgrace." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "But as for being a bad writer, well, I'll have to check first." A small laugh escaped Charlotte despite herself. "Come on," Carole said. "Let me see your essay." Charlotte hesitated. "I don't want you to be mad at me. I just want to judge if you're a bad writer. That's all." Finally, Charlotte reached into her desk and handed over the pages. Carole read carefully, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly warming into a smile. When she finished, Charlotte asked, "So, how bad am I?" "Bad?" Carole laughed. "You're one of my favorite writers. Shakespeare must have learned from you." Charlotte giggled at that. "But honestly," Carole went on, "I have to ask, how on earth did you weave a Nazi story into a fictional tale about a medieval kingdom?" Charlotte looked suddenly shy. "I read about it in the school library. I wanted to try writing as if I was there, to make it feel real." Carole's smile deepened. "And that's exactly why you're unique. That's what makes you one of the best young writers I've ever seen." Charlotte's expression clouded. "Then why is she always like that with me, if I'm unique?" Carole's voice softened. "This isn't the first time?" Charlotte shook her head. "At the Queen's funeral. She did it then, too. When George pinched me, she scolded me instead." Carole took her hands. "Listen to me, you are better than her. Don't give her space in your head. She can't define you." She tapped the essay. "Now, let's fix the paragraphing and a few grammar slips." For the next 20 minutes, they worked together. Carole showed her how to break long sentences into stronger parts, how to use commas to shape meaning, and how to keep her voice steady on the page. When they were done, Carole handed the paper back. "With these changes, you are the best writer ever." Charlotte grinned. "Will you write one just for me before I go?" Carole asked. "Yes," Charlotte said immediately. "I'd like to have a piece from the greatest writer I know." Charlotte's eyes lit up. She jumped from her chair and set to work with renewed energy. The scratch of her pen filled the room. An hour later, she slid the pages across the desk. Carole read carefully, scanning each line for errors. But there were none. "You see? You're a fast learner. I'm keeping this one." Charlotte beamed. The heaviness from earlier was gone. She tucked her essay folder away, then skipped off to join George and Louis in the garden. From the window, Carole watched her granddaughter laugh again, her voice carrying across the grass. The sting of the morning wasn't gone, but it no longer defined the day. But it did not end there. After Carole had soothed Charlotte and restored her confidence, she felt the huge weight of what happened that morning settle heavily on her. She could not simply let it go. From how Camilla spoke to her to the sharpness, even the humiliation, everything was difficult for her to let go. Although Carole was not one for palace politics, She had spent enough time around her grandchildren to know that cruelty, however subtle, could leave scars far deeper than anyone imagined. She rose from the reading room, her face set in quiet resolve. The palace was vast, its hallways echoing faintly with footsteps and murmured voices. Carole walked briskly, scanning each corridor, peeking into drawing rooms, the conservatory, even the smaller private parlors. But Camilla was nowhere to be seen. Finally, one of the footmen noticed her pacing and guessed she might be searching for something. "How may I help you, ma'am?" he asked. "Have you seen Queen Camilla?" she replied. He leaned in slightly and said, "Her Majesty is with the king, in his private study." Carole gave a single nod, thanked him, and walked on. When she reached the study, she paused at the threshold. Through the open door, she could see King Charles seated at a large desk, a stack of documents before him. Camilla sat opposite, legs crossed neatly, a teacup in hand, speaking in low tones. Carole stepped inside. "Your Majesty," she said warmly to the king, inclining her head. Charles smiled faintly, setting down his pen. "Carole, always a pleasure. What brings you here?" "Just a quick word, if I may. With Camilla." Camilla glanced up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "In the hallway, please," Carole said politely but firmly. For a moment, Camilla didn't move. Then, without comment, she rose and followed. The door to the study clicked softly behind them as they stepped into the corridor. Carole turned to face her. She didn't raise her voice, but her tone carried the weight of someone who would not be brushed aside. "What happened between you and Charlotte?" Camilla blinked, then gave a small, dismissive laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about. If this is about my remarks at lunch, it was just a simple joke." "I'm not talking about lunch," Carole said evenly. "I'm talking about before lunch, in the reading room." Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly. "Like I said, nothing happened between me and Charlotte." Carole didn't flinch. "Camilla, I was there. In the reading room. I saw everything." For the first time, Camilla's composure shifted. She adjusted her posture, as though bracing herself. "I said nothing happened," she replied, her voice cooler now. "I simply did what any normal elder would do. I corrected a young girl. What's the issue there?" "That's not how you correct a child," Carole said. Her voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. "You didn't just point out her mistake, you embarrassed her. You made her feel small. That's not teaching, Camilla. That's unkind." Camilla's head tilted up a little, her eyes narrowing. "You're making too much of this. I was firm, yes, but children need firmness. Charlotte will grow up in the public eye. Better she hears the truth from me now than from the newspapers later." Carole's hands stayed at her sides, but her fingers curled slightly. There's a big difference between preparing a child for life and making her afraid of it. "What you said about her and about me wasn't for her benefit. It was about you showing power." Camilla gave a short laugh. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I made a small comment. She'll forget it by tomorrow. Children bounce back quickly." Carole shook her head. Children remember when someone they should be able to trust makes them feel worthless. I've seen what that does. It stays with them." Camilla looked away down the hall, then back at Carole. "Maybe you're just too sensitive. She's your granddaughter, after all. You'll always take her side." "This isn't about me," Carole said firmly. "It's about Charlotte. She's smart and curious, and she's more talented than you realize. If you can't speak to her without breaking her spirit, then maybe you shouldn't speak to her at all." For a moment, they both stood in silence. Somewhere far away, a tea trolley clinked in the corridor. Camilla's lips curved into a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've made your point." Carole kept her eyes on her. Good. I only needed to say it once, and this is not how it ends. You'll hear from me." She turned and walked away, leaving Camilla in the hall, her expression impossible to read. Now, what Carole did next will surprise you. Keep watching to get the full gist. After leaving Camilla in the hallway, Carole didn't waste any time. She went straight to her daughter's private sitting room. Catherine was at her desk, going through some papers. "We need to talk," Carole said, closing the door behind her. Catherine looked up, sensing the seriousness in her mother's tone. "What's happened?" Carole told her everything: the reading room, the shouting, the cruel words, the lunch table remark. She didn't leave out a single detail. When she finished, Catherine's face tightened. "Is Charlotte okay? I saw her outside playing with George and Louis." "Yes, I spoke to her," Carole replied. "She's fine for now. I managed to calm her down. But this isn't something to ignore." Catherine leaned back in her chair. "I'll talk to Camilla." Carole shook her head firmly. "This is not just about talking. I just spoke to her myself, and she wasn't the least bit sorry. She acted like nothing was wrong. I don't believe a quiet conversation will change anything." Catherine's voice was steady but stubborn. "Still, I have to talk to her. It's the right thing to do." Carole wasn't convinced. And what if she laughs it off? What if she does it again? "I'll handle it," Catherine said, though her tone suggested she wanted to end the discussion. Carole studied her daughter for a moment, then decided not to argue further. If Catherine wouldn't push harder, she would. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her mind already made up. This time, she went directly to find Prince William. Carole found Prince William in the smaller of the two drawing rooms, standing near the window with a phone in his hand. He was half-turned toward the gardens, speaking in a low, measured tone to someone on the line. When he saw his mother-in-law at the doorway, he ended the call quickly. "Carole," he said, sounding pleasantly surprised. "Everything all right?" "No," she replied plainly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. His smile faded. "What's happened?" Once again, she told him, every word, every moment, from the reading room to the lunch table. The shock, the humiliation, Charlotte's tears. She didn't hold back, and as she spoke, she saw William's jaw tighten. He crossed his arms, his eyes growing darker with each detail. "She said all of that to Charlotte?" he asked finally, his voice low but edged. "Yes, and she meant every word. I confronted her already. She did not take me seriously. Catherine knows, but she thinks a quiet conversation will be enough. I don't." William's gaze shifted toward the door, as though picturing the corridors where Camilla might still be. "You're right," he said after a moment. "This isn't something we let pass." Carole studied him. "So what will you do?" His expression was unreadable, but his tone was deliberate. "I'll deal with it directly. Camilla will not speak to my children like that again." Carole felt some of the tightness in her chest ease, though her face remained serious. "Good, because Charlotte may be young, but she will remember this. And so will I." William nodded slowly. "And so will Camilla, after I'm done speaking to her." Carole watched William leave the drawing room without another word. His stride was quick and certain, his face set. She knew he wasn't the sort to make empty threats. If he said he would deal with it, he would. The palace was quiet that night. Most of the staff had gone, and only a few lights were left on in the corridors. William had waited until late on purpose. He didn't want an audience. He knew exactly where to find Camilla. She was in one of the smaller sitting rooms, a glass of wine in hand, flipping through some papers. She looked up when he entered, surprised to see him at this hour. "William," she said, smiling faintly, Is everything all right?" "No," he replied, shutting the door behind him. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "We need to talk." Camilla set her glass down slowly. "Oh? What about?" "Charlotte," he said without hesitation. "Carole told me everything. The reading room, the shouting, the way you spoke to her at lunch. I want to hear it from you." Camilla gave a small laugh, as if trying to dismiss it. "Honestly, William, I think Carole has misunderstood. I was just correcting Charlotte. Someone has to teach her." "That's not teaching," William cut in, his tone hardening. "That's bullying. You don't shout at my daughter. You don't belittle her. You don't make jokes at her expense." Camilla's smile faded. "I was only trying to help her improve. If she can't take criticism—" "That wasn't criticism," he said sharply. "It was cruel, and it stops now." She straightened in her chair, then started to act a little defensive. "Are you seriously making this into something bigger than it is?" "It's already big enough," William replied. "You need to understand something, Camilla. My children are off limits. You don't interfere with their schooling. You don't discipline them. And you don't speak to them as if they're beneath you." She opened her mouth to argue, but he didn't let her. "I'm warning you," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "If you ever speak to Charlotte or George or Louis like that again, I will make sure you have no part in this family's life. And when I take the throne, I will decide exactly what role, if any, you have left. Do you understand me?" Camilla's eyes flickered, but she stayed silent. "Do you understand?" William repeated. Finally, she nodded once, stiffly. "Good," he said, stepping back toward the door. "Stay out of my family's business." He didn't wait for her to answer. He left the room without another word, the echo of the warning still hanging in the air. But that was not all. The following morning, William called for George, Charlotte, and Louis to come back down, just for a moment. The 3 children appeared in the doorway, a little confused. They had already changed for bed. William sat them down on the couch. He did not kneel to talk to them like he did before. He just spoke. "I want you to always be kind, always be respectful," he said. "But if anyone treats you like you don't matter, you don't stay silent. Not even in this family." The room was quiet. George looked at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at the floor. William's voice stayed even. "From now on, you don't have to call Camilla grandmother. I want you to be respectful. But she's not your grandmother." He paused. "Your grandmother was Diana. That's the only name you need to know." Charlotte's eyes lifted slightly. George nodded slowly. William leaned in. "Don't let anyone, even someone older, tell you that you are small or unimportant. You tell me. Always." The children were quiet. Then Charlotte asked, "Is she in trouble?" William did not answer right away. "She's not, but she knows what she did, and she will take responsibility for her actions." After the children went back upstairs, William walked the halls alone until he found Carole standing by a window at the far end of the east wing. He told her everything he had done, and she felt a quiet pride at his decision. The next day, Carole returned to her home in Bucklebury. But she did not leave as just a grandmother. She left as a woman who had helped mend the future of a child who had been on the edge of being broken. What do you think about Carole's stand for Charlotte? Was she right to step in, or did she go too far? Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.